because it's so much about care too. The care that you give to yourself is what's going to create the craft, because you have to care for yourself in order to care about your craft, because it's one and the same. When I finally was able to take care of myself, I was able to come back to my art. And that was the biggest gift. That and community. I think my music and my craft and the community that I've gained from sobriety have been the biggest gifts that sobriety has given me.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. We are your hosts, Bryce III, he, him pronouns.
Liz McKean, she, her pronouns.
Liz, how's your energy?
My energy is great. We got to record 2 days in a row this week, and it's maybe my favorite thing ever, because this is my favorite thing that we get to do. So my energy is fabulous. How is your energy, Bryce?
My energy is energying. I don't know. I mean, I'm here. I'm receptive. I'm in the season of listening and of allowing for what's coming in to come in, and so I'm just allowing for it. But I think that allows for some of the best conversations because, like a guest recently told us or put on the floor, like part of being a good steward for love and understanding is listening. And I am super, super duper excited to hear the story of our guest today. Who do we have here with us, Liz?
So today we have one of my favorite people, and I'm going to just move all of our cheese and tell the story of how I met this wonderful person. Back when Phoenix first started doing virtual classes, because the pandemic was starting, things were shut down, and we needed to come together in a different way. That was around the time that I joined Phoenix staff, and it was in that capacity. And one of the things that we've always really prioritized is accessibility. And we had been talking about how we could make live stream classes more accessible, particularly in this conversation for folks who are deaf. And I wanted to talk about whether captions would be a good idea, and if we were to bring captions, how that would happen, and would that even be helpful, and who was a subject matter expert here. And I happened to go on the Facebook page for the New York City Phoenix, and there was this wonderful human just instructing fitness classes who was doing just sign language. And it was so natural and it was so beautiful. And I was like, this is my guy. He's part of the Phoenix and clearly has some knowledge here, and asked him to come to some Phoenix classes of mine. I was teaching then, and he came on and was just like the most wonderful person and had such beautiful feedback and just, brilliant and also humble and so tapped into the community. And so asked him to come on and start instructing on the national live stream, which he's been doing ever since. So Austin is here, and he's such a gift to the community in New York City and nationally. And I'm so grateful to know him. So welcome, Austin. Thank you for being here today.
That was so nice. Thank you all so much for having me. Hello.
Hello.
What's up, Austin? How is your energy today?
Oh, my energy is much brighter now that I'm with y'all. I feel I've been I'm in a transitional phase right now in my life. So I feel like, just like with being the time of year and stuff like that, I'm in school right now. So I've been in school mode, and then it stopped. And now I'm it's almost summer, but not fully yet. So I feel like I've just been a yo-yo up and down with my energy recently. But this is making me feel much more energetic. And all those memories flashing back that Liz just brought, really, really brightened my day. That was very nice to hear. So thank you.
Yeah. I'm so grateful for that time. When we were we still are just figuring it out every day.
Yeah.
We were talking before we hit record, we're just here being nothing but ourselves all the time and doing the best that we can, and being able to, surround ourselves with community that also has that priority that we want to show up as our best selves and do as much good as we can in the world. And it's so much more fun and it's easier and it feels less scary, when you've got people that are so wonderful. So you were one of people that I was running into during that time that made me feel like, okay, this is going to be okay.
Well, and
we can do this.
I can completely just like piggyback off of that and agree, because you came into my journey with the Phoenix and my journey with sobriety at a really early stage. Actually, I had only been on the virtual platform for the Phoenix NYC for like maybe a month before I met you, and it was such an important part of where I was in my journey with recovery as well. And so then having that support and that encouragement from you, bringing me onto the national platform, and it just allowed me to get even closer to this community that it was so important for me at that time. So it's really nice to hear that, because it played such a major role in my own journey with recovery. So thank you for that.
It kind of goes to show that both of us in that moment needed that thing, needed to feel like we were needed and, connected. And it's easy to feel like you're either giving or receiving in any moment, and you're always doing both.
Yeah. And the universe is a crazy thing. It loves to connect people at like the right times. And you're like, oh, there it is.
So true. Yeah. Let's just talk about your story, Austin. So you came across the Phoenix in early recovery. Like, how did that even come to be? Like, what did your recovery journey look like?
Well, it's so interesting, because actually I came into the Phoenix before I was even sober. So I hadn't even started recovery yet. And it was in 2020, like later in 2020, I think it was around August or September. And I came across a listing for like virtual instructors for the Phoenix, New York City. And I was like, I know I've heard of the Phoenix before. What is this? And I looked it up and I realized it was based in Colorado, which is where I used to live. I used to live in Colorado, and my aunt is the CEO of the Rocky Mountain Crisis Hotline. And she had done work with the Phoenix before. And so like, since I was like a teenager, I knew about the Phoenix and knew like what a great, program and it was. And so when I saw that name, it kind of like just sparked my interest right away. And I was like, I don't know why, but I want to work with them so badly. And again, I wasn't sober yet. I was actually like in the depths of my own addiction with alcohol. And it was the craziest thing. I just like, I had just this draw. I was like, I need to get an interview. I need to get a job. And it was like quite a long process. And there was like extensive amounts of time in between. There was like a month before I heard anything back about doing like a video interview. And so then I did the video interview, and then there was like another 2 weeks before I had a phone call. And then there was like another 2 weeks before I had my final interview. But like I kept like pushing. I was like, I want this so bad. And again, I wasn't even sober yet. And, you can't ask those kind of questions in a job interview. No one like could ask, but I just like was very upfront about like, I really, really like would love to work with this community. And I don't think I was even ready at the time to come to terms with the fact that like, the reason I want this so bad is because I need this community and I need to, I need to do this for myself as well. And I think the only way that I was ready to admit that was to have that responsibility of like other people relying on me as well. And I think that's kind of like a trend in my life. Like I do my best when I know that like I have to show up for people. And I didn't, at that point, I didn't have to really, I was really good at hiding my own addiction. People like, I could show up, I could show up still and people wouldn't know. And that was the problem, because I was really good at just covering. And so I think that like, this came at a time when it was like, I had to show myself fully, you know what I mean? And so it was a long process of interviewing for the job. And right after I had my final interview, I kind of in my own life like hit like my rock bottom. And I lost another job because of my own use. And I just like kind of saw, and I almost lost another job because they were like interconnected in some capacity. And, like word spread, whatever. And I kind of was faced at this point of like, I either fix, not fix, but I either heal myself, and approach this issue head on, or I'll lose everything that I've worked like my whole life up to that point for, because, I'm an educator and I'm a performer, and everything that I've done up to this point in my life, like, had kind of led me to this place where I was more high up in New York City as like a choreographer and a teacher. And one of those opportunities just completely went away. And another one was hanging on by a thread. And it was kind of like, okay, Austin, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to allow ourselves to fall? Or are we going to pick ourselves up and finally face this issue that we've been facing for, probably half of my life at that point? I started drinking at a really young age. So, I decided like right at that point, it was like, cold turkey, we're done. We have to do this. And it wasn't really a choice. The choice was made for me, right? And it's crazy because it's really clear in my head. I think that I became fully sober like on a Monday. And that Wednesday, I got a call from the Phoenix offering me a job. And I was like, "Ooh, universe,
Wow.
I see you. I see you. Okay." And it was like, you just lost something, Austin, but here's another opportunity. And like, are you going to take it? And so it's kind of crazy because I feel like I got this responsibility for the Phoenix at a time when I really maybe wasn't ready for it. But again, the type of person that I am, I think the way that I was going to show up the best was to know that I had that responsibility. The timing was so magnificent. And it was like, here it is. This is your choice. And this is your opportunity to do the right thing. Right? Yeah. And that was how I got involved with the Phoenix. And luckily, like, I had a little bit of time before I actually started teaching, because there was all this, training that came along after the fact. So like by the time I was actually teaching, I felt like I was a little bit more grounded. But again, having that rock to kind of like hold me up during that time was huge for me. And then once I actually started becoming a part of the community, like this was the community that I knew I needed. I was doing AA for a while, and I was doing, the meetings and all that stuff. And it was really like helpful at that time, but it wasn't something that felt like sustainable for me. But this community has been like it's just like such a great home base and such a great consistency that I've needed, like, for my own recovery, to always come back to know that I'm being, supported, to be able to have like real conversations like this even, and have people that I know are in my corner, no matter where you are in the world. It's like that consistency has been, and that positivity is what I needed in my own recovery. And again, it came at the very beginning, and it's been here ever since. And I don't ever see it going away. So that's just been like, yeah, really, really huge for me.
That's so cool. I love hearing that it was that you came into the Phoenix, so early on, and, still figuring it out, and still getting the point that, like you said, you're really good at hiding it. And I think, we're not only good at hiding it to other people, who are good at hiding it from ourselves, and, just starting to be honest with yourself. And I can only speak for myself, but I would just imagine that others have had this experience where I remember the first time I went to a Phoenix class. I remember the first time I walked into a 12-step meeting, and immediately, and without any reason except for my own brain was telling me this, was sure that everybody else had it figured out and had been sober for a very long time. And it was just so embarrassing that I was brand new and didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And, even in those spaces, felt like I couldn't really immediately be honest, because I just felt like I was way behind.
Yeah.
And that's like, not real.
It was interesting.
Not
like, I feel like that hasn't stopped for me in sobriety. Like, there's been multiple instances where, like, I walk into a new room where I'm working to gain competency, and my baseline is feeling like everybody in this room knows more than me, and everybody got to figure it out. And the more like I settle into it, the more I realize like, oh, like nobody knows what the hell they doing for real. And like everybody's just on a path of continuous learning.
Yeah.
And I think, Austin, like how you shared when I asked you how your energy was, and I think real recognize real was like people who I know have the capacity to hear and hold Like when they ask me how I'm doing or how am I or how's my energy, like I'll be 100% honest and I'll go in and like really assess and then bring out what it is that I find
Yeah.
versus like giving that baseline like, oh, I'm good or oh, I'm fine or oh, because that disclosure has allowed for the growth that I've had the privilege to be able to benefit from.
Absolutely. Don't ask me a question if you don't want to hear the real answer. That's what I'm gonna say. But it's true. It's
Yeah.
like if you allow yourself to it's a gift when someone checks in, right? And so like accept the gift even. You asked me how my energy was, and I was like, well, I haven't actually asked myself that yet, so let's actually check in. But you're so right that honesty and that internalized questioning, I think, is the way that you continue to move forward, the way you continue to heal. And that's like step one, right? It's just like actually checking in and actually asking yourself those questions.
Yeah. And I think the fallacy of feeling as if we'll ever like know or like arrive is what can cause for the not being nice to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just not even being honest with ourselves too. You know what I mean? I think that was my biggest thing was, again, the universe or whatever it was, like knew before I did that I needed help, right? And that's why the Phoenix came to me at the time that it did before I was even ready to fully accept it. And so it's that thing of like, it's like unless we kind of like keep opening ourselves up and keep questioning and keep like allowing things to come into us, like we won't heal. We won't come to terms with our own things, I guess.
Speaking of our own things, I do want to dive into both your relationships with being an educator as well as being a performer. And I know they're two different realms, but can intertwine in so many beautiful ways. Yeah. But like when we're talking about how we show up as our authentic selves and being honest with ourselves, being an educator, like my favorite teachers are adamant about the fact that the more they find out, the less they know. And so like that's the type of person I want to be a student up under.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you're on this journey just like me.
Oh, yeah.
So in being an educator and teaching people, as you continue to learn and be nice to yourself, how has that experience been, and how has that played a role into your personal recovery?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the Phoenix came at a time that like I absolutely needed that support. And also teaching was at the Phoenix and teaching dance, which is what I teach. That was like my safety. That is like what kept me going and kept me showing up every single day to not give up for my students. And the fact that like I had a place where I was just able to give and receive. And like you were saying, we're constantly doing both. And that is so true. And for me as an educator, like I am always telling my students, I'm learning from you. You all are teaching me while I'm here just holding space for y'all to do your own discovery. Like I truly feel like every single time I am in a room and taking on the role as educator, like I am also just learning constantly, because students, no matter what age they are, they know so much, and they give so much. They give so much when you allow them to. And that's what I've learned. So I think that my journey with recovery has allowed me to be more receptive and more open to my students and to be more honest with them as well. And because of that, it has allowed them to do the same for me. And I think that's what I've really learned, is that like the more you show up and the more you open up for your students, but I guess this is just people in general, honestly, the more you do that, the more you're going to get it in return. You know what I mean? And that's why, to bring it back even to what you were just saying, Bryce, too, about like the conversation with energy, it's like, that's why if you are willing and you're ready to open yourself up to others, it's going to come back to you, you know? So whether it's as a teacher, whether it's in conversation, you know, if you can allow yourself to do that, it's going to come back to you.
What has been some of like the biggest lessons in that process for you? Like when it comes to having that reciprocal process between teacher and student, but also like allowing for the students to be a pathway to your higher understanding as you continue to show up for your craft.
It's like, Lessons. That's a good question. I think that the biggest lesson has been I'm a control freak. So that's number one. And I think that's probably how I got into teaching as well, is because I love having control and I don't do well with listening to, I didn't. I'm still working on that. Listening to authority. I wasn't always the best with that. And I always wanted to be like, well, I want to do things differently. So I think that's what led me to teaching. But that level of control, it was really hard for me to give up and to realize that being a teacher didn't mean having full control. And I think that also led to being a human and living as a human. We do not have full control and we never will. So I think that those two things were realizations were probably happening simultaneously. And that's why my time of recovery is when I really opened up as an educator fully, I think, is because I was learning that process of letting go. So I think that was the biggest lesson, is just realizing that you don't need to have control 24/7. You don't have control and there's no way you ever will. And also, like, nor should you. There's no reason for that. How are we supposed to learn? How are we supposed to grow? How are we supposed to experience anything if we're just constantly trying to grasp, like, 100% of the time? You know what I mean? And so I think the biggest lesson was to show up and be like, here's what I have ready to go. Here's what I have planned. And now let's just see what happens along the way. And so much more learning actually happened once I allowed myself to just let things be and not be like hyper fixated on things going exactly as planned. And I used to literally put out times for how long every like activity should take. That is wild. If you have ever taught anything, you know that there is no way to actually like time out a 60-minute class to happen in 60 minutes. There's no way. And so I think just like allowing myself to let go of that and see where things go in the classroom, like that's when the real learning happened. And, you know, then you just take that into your day-to-day as well as best you can.
Yeah, I was really going to riff off of the parallels into like living. And I think if we think about like craft, in my men's group, we had the topic of like, what is art? And then at the end of that group, we really like the better question is, what isn't art? and so you were talking about like, the way that you teach, but that sounds like the way I write music.
Yeah.
That sounds like the way that I show up for my crafts. That sounds like the way I teach, the way I create content, the way I work with people, the way I guide communication and conversation.
Yeah.
And is that ability to be able to allow for the craft and all within it to teach me and also learn to be intentional about where I want to guide it.
Yeah.
And having the experience of like that balancing act, which has never been balanced for me. Like I've never been like, oh, I'm completely zen and 100% like balance in the middle. Is always I'm a little bit too much this way or a little bit too much that way, but it's been that inclination to pivot that has been like my active participation in life.
Yeah.
So like the willingness to look and continue to look and continue to look, to have the continuity of the awareness in how I show up, because, you know, I care about my craft. I care about my students. I care about my art.
Yeah.
With all that said, like I want to like pivot into like the music and what is your relationship with your creativity in your music and your craft, and how is that parallel to maybe how it is that you show up to teach?
Yeah, well, like you were just saying, you know, like showing up and also like allowing it to kind of like happen naturally, right? And so I think it goes into creating art as well. What is art? What isn't art? Like you just said, it everything is. And so I think that once I realized like learning how to let go and having full control over like teaching over my life, that also went into my art making as well. You know, when I try to be like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write the song today, but like nothing's there naturally, like it's not going to happen. And there was a time when really I was struggling because I was like, I'm not making. And it's because I was so hyper fixated on like the doing of it rather than just like opening myself up to being inspired and to letting the lyrics come to me, letting the music come to me. So yes, I just what you were saying, I 1000% agree with. But what was the actual question though? I just had to riff off of that
know.
first.
Who cares what the questions are, Austin? we just go on with the flow.
So
I think too.
Hey everybody, this is Andy Short. You might remember me from episode 34 of this very podcast. I am here to talk a little bit about Pride season at the Phoenix. As a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I know it can be hard to find sober or recovery focused Pride spaces. Phoenix is here to change that. We got hundreds of events across the country for y'all, in person, online, social events, workouts, hikes, all kinds of amazing celebrations for the community. So come on out. If you can hear the sound of my voice, I love you personally, the person who is listening. You are loved by me. Create the space with us, and let's have an amazing Pride season. And how you can do that, it's pretty easy. Just go to your local app store, download the Phoenix app, see what's happening nearby or online, and come on out.
Circling back to like being nice to ourselves. Like a big part of my identity was tied into what it is that I produce.
Right. Oh my gosh.
And still can be.
Absolutely.
And still can be. Like if I'm not saying something all the time, if I'm not in your face, if I'm not like at the forefront, then who am I? Like, why? Then I'm not important. And it's like, well, what I've learned is like there's these pockets of like quiet reflection, listening, paying attention, consuming that allow for me to have a better relationship with my craft.
Yeah.
And, you know, once again, like this could just be a metaphor for each other. It's like where before recovery, I think I had this notion that things were like super linear, like the black and white is this way and it goes that way. But it's like the way is like colorful blobs that just like mold and flow into each other and like learning to allow for that process has been, just like that has been the process of learning how to show up for life on life's terms.
Yeah. I have this tattoo that is like it's a rainbow kind of, but it's not fully a rainbow. It's like all a little fucked up because it's like not even a rainbow. It's like linear. It's all just like the colors are constantly flowing through each other because nothing is linear in this life. And that's such a hard lesson to learn for me because I'm a control freak and I love control. I love order. And that was really hard for me as well too. But what's crazy is that when I was in the like depths of my addiction, like I was not creating for like years. And when the second I went into recovery and I had that time, like you said, to listen, to be silent and to like go inward and to also allow for the outward to come in as well, I created my first album. Like I went into my own studio and just like fully produced the art that had been like holding inside of me for so long and that I finally could just like listen to and care for, because it's so much about care too. The care that you give to yourself is what's going to create the craft, you know, because you have to care for yourself in order to care about your craft because it's one and the same, right? And so like when I finally was able to take care of myself, I was able to come back to my art, and that was the biggest gift. That and community. I think my music and my craft and the community that I've gained from sobriety have been the biggest gifts that sobriety has given me. I never released music. I wasn't ready to before I was sober. It was really, really personal to me and it was really scary. I've always had like kind of like a presence that I like allow people to see. And people always knew me as like, you know, a performer and a choreographer and a teacher, and Austin's so outgoing, blah, 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 blah. Like we know what he's all about. But like my music was something that I always kept to myself. And it was really scary to me to ever allow anyone into that. But I think with all the healing that came from recovery and all the reflection that came, I realized, and the people around me as well helped me realize, like, you have something to say and there's ways that people could really benefit from hearing your story. And so that's what allowed me to finally be like, okay, fine, here we go, let's do this, and allow me to release music. And I think I released my first single a little bit after, it was like just a little bit after a year of my sobriety. And it was a song called Closer to Clear. And it was all about like kind of like yearning for for that like return to reality and to see things like clear again for the first time, because everything just seemed so foggy, so fake and, inauthentic when I was like in that the darkest of places. And I just really was like yearning for human connection, yearning for to see the world like how it actually is, rather than the ways that like my mind has created it or changed it. Not even my mind, but what everything that I was taking in was changing my mind to see things, right? But the only way that I could get to that point where I could share that story and to allow people to listen to it fully too, was to go through the stages, to go through the recovery process, and to allow myself to fully acknowledge and understand what I need, so that I can also then let it go. Because again, it's reciprocal. It comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes. And so when I give, it comes back. And we're all just circular here today. There it is again. Yeah.
Yeah, music is interesting, man. Like the creation of it, the people who consume it, the relationship between those two aspects of it. I mean, I think for me, because I've always been in the music for real. Like I think I first started writing when I was like 12 or 13.
Same.
The relationship I had with my music before entering into intentional living recovery, it wasn't as authentic. It wasn't as hand in hand with who it is that I see myself as being.
Yeah.
There can, it could be a bit performative. You call yourself being a performer. And it's like, if we get booked for a show, like we're performing.
Yeah.
And how much of that is us. And so I used to go on stage and had like the big glasses on and like wouldn't look at the crowd, and I'd have to be like super high to like even performing. And so when I got sober, like, I'm like, how am I, like, I don't even think I'm going to be able to have a relationship with this thing anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And what was crazy was like the relationship that developed and cultivated from me, like actively pursuing it in sobriety and recovery. Like it's unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah, it's so true. I for so long was like, I felt like no one would understand, no one would get it. Like when I was actively using, like I was like, no one's gonna care about what I have to say. No one's gonna understand. This is just for me. Like no one's gonna get it. But it took me actually like, coming to terms with my own recovery to be like, this isn't just about me. And also like the more authentic I am with myself, like the more like people are actually going to understand what you're saying. Like when you are real with yourself, then you can be real with others, and then people will be receptive to that.
Yeah.
Well, and also like letting go of that control of what people are going to get out of what you put out into the world. Like,
because that's not your
we've
business.
had a few other artists on here. Right, exactly. They're going to hear what they need to hear. And that's your only job is to release it with all the beautiful intention that you put behind it.
Yeah.
It's another releasing of control, which I think is so interesting, because I feel like when we think about, I don't know, just the very stigmatized version of a person who has substance use disorder is someone completely out of control, and so many people that we talk to and so many of us are like, all we want is control. Like we are the most controlled.
Please.
And even when we're using substances, right? It's like we're using the substance because we want to control how we feel, and
that's
then
exactly
we lose that control.
That's what I was going to say, is that the reason I was using so much and reason so many people use is because that was something that you could control. I can control what is in my hand, how it goes down, and how quick it goes. You know what I mean? Like that is the definition of control. Allowing yourself to go to the point of out of control is control, right? What you don't have control of is letting that go and being like, and healing. That's not in your control. You know what I mean? It's So it's so true.
So true. I think that's hard for people to understand if they haven't experienced it. Like, from the outside, it's like, if you had any control, you would stop. If you had any willpower, and it's like, it's like really opposite in our head when we're in it. And that also makes it hard to, like you said, get help, because that feels like a relinquishing of a control of how you feel, of like saying that raising your hand and saying, I need someone to help me and someone to maybe, take over some of those reins is terrifying. And then when you do, seeing how much you get back is like shocking.
Yeah, it's shocking. And it's like, oh, that's where the healing really can start, because you can open yourself up to accept it, right? It's so interesting though, because you're so right. People have such an idea of what it looks like or what it should be when you are dealing with substance abuse, right? And to the point where still to this day, when my friends are like, "Oh, but like you're not really an addict though." Like that's crazy. Like you're not an addict because like you're sober now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it's like, because also they saw one side of it, or people see one side of it. And so they're like, but it wasn't that bad, right? And I was like, you have no idea like what there's, because of the images that were fed through media and through advertisement and through like of what addiction looks like. People, I think that's part of the problem, and that why so many people don't get help when they need it, because you think that it looks one way, but it's like there's so many levels to substance abuse, and all of it is valid and all of it needs to be addressed. You know what I mean? And just because it's not what someone sees or understands as addiction, like it doesn't mean that it's like that it's okay or that it's like not a problem. You know, I think that just we need to really be more. I think that's why it's so important for us to be open about our stories, so that people can hear and be like, oh, like it looks like a million different things. And also like we should be receptive to what other people are going through, no matter how they're displaying it, you know?
Yeah, I think, and at the risk of sounding like a bro dude.
Please sound like a bro dude.
We need it. We need it here.
Nah, but like choose your herd. Like pick your herd. So when you're talking about like the controlling of life, like like when I wanted to be creative, like I smoke weed. Yeah. Like when I wanted to be smart, I pop the Adderall. Like when I wanted to like be loose, like I drink some alcohol. Like if I wanted to be social, I'd pop Xanax. If I wanted to be, it was like I was working to control. But towards the end, like there was always this part of it within a day. It'd be like, yeah, oh, whoa, too much.
Yeah.
And it's like that thin line between like, yeah, I'm exactly the coolest dude in the world, the most creative, the most outgoing, the best person I could ever be, and then crossing that thin little line to like, whoa, like I overdid it and I can't take it back now. And like the next day I would start all over.
Yeah.
Like with nothing gained from that experience.
No.
Whereas like now I feel like I have a similar experience, because there's points and times where I feel like I'm really like cool and competent and I get it and I understand and I'm tapping in and I'm the best person in the world. And then like something humbles me and it's like, oh. But like I go into the next day with the weight of the lessons that I learned yesterday. Yeah. Because I'm not erasing those experiences.
You're like aware and like you're here to take them in. Yeah.
Exactly. So like life means something now. And they both of those things were hard, right? But it's like, what hard would I rather endure? The one that turns me into the person ultimately that I desire to be, because I'm on this pathway of learning, developing, and growing, or the me that is like, no matter how much I show up and play with the different variables, like every day is just a blank slate of like, I didn't learn. And maybe I woke up today and shit is a lot worse than it was yesterday, because maybe I crashed into something, or maybe I said something, or maybe I offended somebody and I don't even know what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's like that. Just the being open, being aware, and being like having the awareness is like what allows you to move forward in all aspects of life, and if you are constantly trying to, if you're using and try to in order to gain like something, like the using of it is always going to get in the way of that awareness. And so like so you have to like take that away so that you can actually experience life. That was so true. Yeah.
And you deserve it.
Oh my gosh.
Like you deserve to experience your life. Like every single person deserves it. And it's a gift to be able to see that. And one of the ways, this is going to be my cool kid transition, that you're helping people to see that. I know that you're working on something right now, an album that brings together like music and recovery and community and all the things that have served you So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So it really happened really organically where I was writing a lot and I realized that what I was writing about was my own experience of recovery and the different stages of recovery that I've experienced for the past 2 years. So how that kind of came together was through this concept album that is currently working title called Stages. That's kind of going through the different experiences I've had with discovery, from the pink cloud to the dark like days of being like, is any of this worth it? And everything in between, So I'm currently in the studio with my producers and team working on creating the whole album. And it's all going to culminate into a live performance next spring that is going to, because I'm trying to kind of cross my different loves of art together, and I'm going to be creating a live performance experience that is going to be a full dance performance to the album. So it's going to be a movement album. Every song is going to have a different piece to it, but they're all going to interweave the way that the album does. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what we're working on right now. And it's been a really healing experience and a really just telling experience as well. And I'm really lucky that the producer that I'm working on this with is also a sober individual who is in the early stages of his own recovery. And this has been just such a beautiful collaboration of being able to share, what I've learned from the past 2 years with someone who's in the first few months of their own recovery, and getting to create art around it has been just so such a gift. It's been so giving. And yeah, and it's turning into a really beautiful project that I really want to bring more people's experiences into, because this is short. It's very much so from the perspective of my own experience that is, unique and personal to me. But there's so many layers and themes of it that I think are going to really resonate with so many people who have gone through any type of recovery. And so my goal is for the actual performance is to be able to share people's stories in the performance as well through interludes, and to, have people talk on and share and contribute, whether it's through like their own words, like vocally, or through writing that we can display through the performance space. That's going to allow people to share their own stories with these themes and their own stories of recovery. So that's where we're at right now.
That is so cool. Like, I reserve me a ticket. Like, that is such a cool project. And I love I think anything that we do that's worthwhile is like this, but just the fact that like the journey to it is just as, if not more important than the final product.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about that final, it's like this whole, and to have like those different experiences within recovery at the very baseline of it, you and your producer. That's cool.
Yeah, it's been really cool to be able to like acknowledge my own like lessons that I've learned that I don't realize until I'm actually talking to someone who's like experiencing it for the first time. And I'm like, whoa, we have come some, because sometimes, I'm sure you all feel this, where it's like, okay, like, yeah, I'm sober. Like, what now? Like, you kind of forget that like you're actively learning and you're actively healing like every single day until you're able to share like and listen to someone who's going through it for the first time. And it's like, oh, cool. This has given me a lot, hasn't it?
Well, I think that's the perfect segue into the final question that we have for you, which will be an active practice for you to really comb through your experience and see how you've healed. If you had the opportunity to go talk to any iteration of Austin and tell that iteration of Austin something, what iteration of Austin would you go grab, and what would you tell him?
Oof. I think the version of Austin that that needs this Austin the most is the one that was at the very, very beginning of recovery, who was choosing whether to like go forward or not, and deciding if this was worth it. And I think that if I could go to him, I would hold him and I would just let him know that like there is so much more than what is in front of you right now, than what's behind you. than what you are feeling in this very moment. Like, it feels like right now everything is over, but like truly it is just the beginning. And the people that you're going to encounter, the experiences that you're going to have, the community that you're going to become a part of, and the art and the lessons and the gifts that are coming are so much more than anything you've experienced up to this point. And even though it's really, really hard right now, don't stop. Keep going. Keep going, because it gets so much better. Yeah.
I love it. Perfect. And it's going to keep getting better. I feel like, there'll be a time in the future. I've been thinking about this lately, about when we ask this question, years from now, we're going to look back and have words for this version of us, that will probably be pretty similar. Like, keep it up, man. You're doing it. Like, it's just going to keep getting better. There's so much, and it's worth it. So thank you.
Oh, thank y'all so much.
Yeah. Could not even be more grateful for you coming on, Austin. It's always so fun to see you and talk to you. And folks can get more of you in several ways, right? Where can they find more, Austin?
Well, my Phoenix friends, y'all can join me every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the virtual platform for some stretch and strengthen. And if you want some cardio fun, you can join me on Wednesdays and Fridays at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. For a little bit of cardio movements. But all of those classes are 30 minutes long, and obviously it's completely free. The only cost is 40 hours of continued sobriety, and you can sign up for those through the Phoenix app. But if y'all want to follow me on my music journey, you can follow me on Instagram at Austin_MRQZ. And if you want to see some of my movement stuff, you can follow me on Instagram at Marquez. That's MARQUEZ_movement. Marquez movement. So yeah.
Awesome. And we will link all of that in the show notes. And definitely folks need to come to your class, because it is so cool. And there's always, I think, a little bit of dance included, I think, in most of what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Pretty awesome. Yay. Well, we did it, and it was even better than we ever could have dreamed. So thanks for being here, and thanks everybody for listening. Couldn't have done it without you. And again, we're always so grateful if you would subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. We're going to have some bonus episodes coming out here and there. And if you're subscribed, you won't miss a thing. And if you would be so kind to review, to rate, to give us a little 5-star rating, that's just like the greatest gift. And send this episode to somebody that you care about, because it's a good one and they're going to want to hear it. And we want to hear from you too. And I can't wait to hear how Bryce is going to have us connect with you.
Well, how you can connect with us is you lock yourself in a studio and you start to write a concept album. And the first 2 tracks, track 1 has to be Where's Liz? Track 2 has to be Where's Bryce?
On track 1.
Nah, what you do is you go to the Google Play Store or the App Store and download the Phoenix app, which is a cool app in general that gives you access to this community, so you can come to some of Austin's classes. But when you get in there, there's these community groups. One of the community groups is the Rise, Recover, Live podcast community group. Pop in there. Come say hi to me, Liz, Austin, and the 2,000-something plus other community members in that group. And let us know what you like about this show. Let us know what you like about this specific episode. Come comment some of your favorite excerpts from this episode. Let us know what you don't like about the show. Give us feedback. Let us know what you'd like to see more of, less of, whatever. That's where the conversation is happening. So come see us, the community group, Rise, Recover, Live community group in the Phoenix app. And I'll see you there.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.